our amount's small enough that we can all fit in there. And we'll even make coffee for you. And who knows, we might even be able to sneak some cookies in. Well, I'll leave that alone so I don't get in trouble. But I don't know what she's hanging out in the back tonight, it looks like. But I'm glad that you're here. How many know that the noise level went down? I think it's because all the kids left. But just be praying for our families. How many know this is a good time of year, special? But how many know for families that are struggling, this is a rough time, right? Those that lose loved ones, it's really difficult, and especially this time of year. And please continue to remember Claudia's son and her sister that lives here. And I always laugh a little bit because she could have been Sister Hayes' new mom. But we'll leave that alone. Those that don't know, it's okay. But you know, that's you know, it's so unique about Sister Ray and I. We've been around here so long that we know way too much. We'll just leave it at that, right? But yeah, it's okay. But also remember Sister Elaine and George, all our older ones, Sister Lucero, especially this time of year. And pray for Dorianne too. How many know being the caregiver is not easy? You know, it gets where it can wear on you pretty quick. So just remember those in prayer, that the Lord will just put his hand upon them and give them the encouragement and strength that they need. I thought it would be kind of neat. This is we're going to be in Luke chapter 2, verse 7. Now, the good news tonight, all our scriptures will be on this paper. So that way you don't have to look them up. You can if you want to. Hopefully, Brother Hay didn't get the wrong number on the paper. I've been known to do that once or twice. And that the way that works is Brandon always calls me forgets a lot. That's what he calls me. He says, Papa, you just forgets a lot. I said, okay. Well, the other day he had forgot something, and I said, oh, I guess you're the new forgets a lot, huh? And so just so you know, it can happen to anybody, right? We all can make a mistake. But just keep that in prayer. And also just remember all those that are just struggling right now. And please pray for our country. How many know there's a lot of stuff going on out there and a lot of things happening, and we just need to remember. We're going to talk about, if you look at the top of your papers, it should say no room for Jesus. And I think about this quite often, and we talk about it a lot in Sunday school. And I know Brother Singletary's not here tonight either, so remember him and Wanda and some of the others that are usually pretty much regular. And what's his name's mom and dad? Logan's mom and dad. And sorry, what's his name doesn't count. Logan does. Everybody knows who Logan's mom and dad are. But anyway, remember them in prayer too. They're not here. But some of our regulars that usually come. But when we make a statement like no room for Jesus, how many know that's not anything new? How many think that we're living in a time when people are just so crazy busy? And if they're not busy, how many know that they're filled with other things? I thought about how many times we always talk about the good old days, but I got to let you in on a secret. I don't think Sister Hay would really want to use a wringer washer. See, all these ladies say that until they have to. Especially, I know that Sister Hay had one, and I'm sure Darlene did. But if they had to go and start cranking that puppy, I mean, no, Sister Hay already wants an upgrade. But I'm just being honest with you. You know, sometimes we think about the good old days, all that kind of stuff, but how many know progress is something that's going to happen? And we're living a little bit of a frightening time as far as how many are like, Brother, hey, it's hard to tell what's real sometimes and what's not, especially with AI. And stuff you get on your news feed, stuff you see on the internet, just take my word for it, be very cautious. it could be true, and it might not. And my mind goes back, and when Sister Hay and I, this is how long we've been in Portales. When we first came to Portales, she's watching to see if I get her in trouble. But but when we first came to Portales, the phone company here used to have an office over on Avenue B. Anybody remember that? Okay, well, if you've been around for a long time, and guess what was in that office? No, it's not an office anymore, but guess what was in there? Operators. Yeah, we forgot about that. Anybody remember when you did a long distance call, you had to get an operator? I know now we're dating ourselves, but anyway, and I think about how much things have changed. And I know for a lot of people, you've heard Brother Hay say this, and my brother's here, so I won't lie to you. He can back me up on this. We lived pretty much our whole life without a telephone. You know, we just couldn't afford one, and guess what? We didn't have a telephone. And sometimes we lived close to people that had telephones, sometimes not so much. Nobody writes letters. Yeah, or comes to see you. Yep. You used to always make sure you had a dime in your pocket so you make a phone call to the house. Okay. I remember when it went to a quarter, just in case you're wondering. But but and I look at those kind of things, right? And people talk about, well, let's go back to good old days. Well, some of them were better, but some of them weren't so well. Okay? Imagine all the people if they had to cook popcorn on their stove. Had to cook their popcorn on the top of the stove. It's good popcorn, but how many people would want to do it? See, Sister Laura's like, yeah, you shook them. I remember when they came out with Jiffy Pop, okay? That was like the newest thing, because remember, you put that on a stove, and it was all contained, and it blow itself up, and, man, you were done. You didn't have to mix all that stuff and do all that kind of stuff. Yep. I just think in my mind, can you imagine if people really had to do that today? You know, well, first of all, she hit on something that's real important. They really don't know how. And so, yeah, probably not that many left anymore. And I look at these kind of things, and we start talking about not having room for Christ in our life. But here's the bad side of all the progress. That progress has pushed out the personal aspect of people. Okay? And I'll admit, Brother Hayes, the world's worst. I am not a texter. Okay? I'm not a phone call kind of guy. I like to go see people, and I'm not really able to get out and do that like I used to. And it's really hard, actually. But you know, something happens when you lose that personal communication and touch. Does that make sense? And so I look at that and I think about how many things in our life do we not have room for anymore? How about just talking? Have you ever been out to eat and watch families with all their electronics? And nobody's even talking to each other. No, they're not. And like when we take the kids out to eat and stuff, I have to tell them, okay, phone's off for a little bit. How many know they're all mad at me? I'm just telling you, everybody's upset. Well, I got to turn my phone off. Well, you will survive without it. But when we start talking about not having room, we got to remember this also about our relationship with the Lord. Part of the issue is very few people know how to open a Bible and read anymore, okay? And one of the things that I figured out over a long time, especially the last 4 or 5 years, though this has really come to a head, you start looking up things, you better be careful to verify what somebody is telling you is in God's Word. Because believe it or not, there are a lot of people out there that twist a lot of things to make them say something other than what it really says. Yep. But it used to be people made time to open their Bible and to actually read it. And so when we're talking about not having room, but let me not even talk about Jesus, let's just talk about it in our own families. You have to make room for your kids. You got to make room for your grandkids. You have to make room for communication. A husband and wife needs to make room for communication. If you don't, you're going to be in trouble. That's the way that it is. And if you want to know, one of the saddest things that Brother Hay has had to deal with people over the years is when somebody says, oh, man, if only I knew this was going to happen, and you fill in the blank. I would have done this. I would have came and saw him. I would have done all these different things, right? And so the enemy from the very beginning has always been about pushing relationships apart and causing people not to have room in their life to operate. Because I hate to tell you this, no matter how much you think you can replace a person with electronics, you can't. They'll never fulfill that space that God created in us because, believe it or not, he created us to be social. He created us to have a relationship with him, to talk to him, to pray, to do all those kind of things, to communicate, right? But he also made us that way to communicate with people. And over the years especially, it's really easy, if you're not careful, that things change so slowly that we don't pick up on it. Now, when we lived in Delaware, there was a unique thing about these crabs they had. Okay? Now, I'm not a seafood kind of guy, but I love devil crabs, okay? And I like shrimp as long as it's fried. I like fish as long as it's fried. I'm not one of these eat this stuff raw kind of things. That be Brandon. I don't know who he gets that from, but he loves raw everything. He loves sushi. Yeah, I mean, he's just kind of weird that way. That's what I always tell him. I go, I don't know how you do that, kiddo, but not Papa. But anyhow, something else in it. Yeah, it's got rice or whatever. It's not what we would think. But you know, in my little feeble mind sometimes when I'm thinking about all these kind of things that are going on around us, those crabs were unique. Do you know how they cooked them? They put them in cold water. You know why they put them in cold water? And they kill you when you eat them. You can't eat those crabs if you throw them into hot water. That crab automatically secretes some kind of poison and it will kill you or make you deathly sick. And so when we lived in Delaware, it was kind of interesting, bro. Hey, like I'd see these people and, you know, there's no fire. They're just putting these crabs in those pots. Anybody know what crabs do when they're still alive and the water's cold? They're always trying to climb out of that thing. But what is so funny is as they turn the heat up and that water heats up slow, those crabs don't even realize that they're in trouble. Yep. Just throw them in the thing. Yep. Yep, and you'd be good to go. Oh yeah. Yep. And you look at that and think about all the changes that are going on right now. Imagine if they would have all these things would have happened all at once. People would have had a big rejection to them. Okay? I remember this is so funny to me. I remember when TV was a thing. And I know most of you in here are too young to remember this. My brother probably does a little bit. I know you do because we're kind of in that same age group. I know you're younger than me. I'm going to get in trouble. But 25, there you go. But she'll remember this. There was a time in the church, because I know her daddy was a preacher. There was a time in the church, if you had a TV in the church, you were in a lot of trouble. Yep. And not, I mean, not if you came to church and you had a TV in your house, you were in a lot of trouble. Right? Y'all remember that? Or, well, we do. Now, yep. I remember us getting our first one, and I still remember the show that I watched, the first one really that was in color. Please don't laugh. I don't even know when they first produced this. The name of the show was Johnny Quest. That was like one of my favorite shows. I like that little guy. But anyway, that was like one of the first color shows. But I remember that over a period of time, TVs kind of slowly came into being, right? And I'm sure there's people that stayed home to watch Gunsmoke and Bonanza. Okay, probably shouldn't have, but they did. Back then we used to have church on Sunday night, Super Bowl III. And we used to have church back then on Sunday nights. So, but I look at that and you think about how slow that process was. And so all of a sudden, everybody has TVs. Now nobody even thinks about that. Ask Sister Hay how she did TV when we were in Bible school, because the school we went to wouldn't let you have a TV. Sister Hay had a black and white TV in our closet. But the only problem was it didn't get no stations. Sometimes it would get one because we were on top of a mountain. It didn't get very good reception. But anyway, we were only about 20 miles from Pittsburgh, 25 miles, I guess. Closer than that to Monroeville, which now is way past where the Bible school used to be. But I think about Sister A sneaking that little TV in there trying to watch it. Okay, it didn't really work that well. So, but if you go back further, and Brother Hayes not this old, but if you go back further, it was the radios. Okay? And there were things on the radios. Sister Hayes' dad still liked to listen to some of the programs they had on at night. And they would tell stories and read things and all that kind of stuff. Only a shadow knows. All those cool things, right? Yep. And over a period of time, the radios became accepted, right? And then the TVs came along, and they were accepted. Then here's what the thing was. Well, okay, you can have a TV in your house, but you better not be going to the movies. Okay? That was a big deal. Matter of fact, in the Church of God, if they found out you went to a movie, you'd probably be in a lot of trouble. But anyway, we'll just leave that alone. But I look at those kind of things, and what happens is over a long period of time, things begin to be accepted. And so what I'm saying to you is be careful when we're talking about no room for Jesus, which is what our Bible study would be. I want you to think in your life and start pitching in your mind how certain things have pushed good things out of your life. Okay? And it's important that we recognize that. And years ago, we were still in the other building. And now, I'm not like Michael. I'm not cutting edge, but I always, being in the Air Force, I was around a lot of newer stuff. So, there's certain things that that, hey, this makes life easier, it makes it better. In the old days, for Bible studies, I used to have this big old board. I have to drag that thing in here, and I use those markers, and I put my stuff on the board, right? And we'd have it up there, but I don't know where my Kaylee is. The first one you should have up there, baby, is Luke 2:7. I don't know where that one came from. But now we can put them in there in the back, and immediately we can see them, right? And so we have a lot more access. But back then you couldn't. But I could make slides in this thing they call PowerPoint. Fabian knows what PowerPoint is. Okay? some of the older ones might be saying to Brother, hey, well, I'm your age, but I don't remember PowerPoint. Well, if you don't use it, you really don't know what it was. But in the military, we used it a lot for presentations, slides, those kind of things, so that when you were talking about stuff, you can put it all on that slide, made it a lot nicer. But I remember the first time I had a old TV, probably weighed 400 pounds, and a stand, and I put the TV on a stand, and I had a little computer hooked up to it, and I could play PowerPoint on it. And I remember there were ladies in the church and a couple guys came to me after church and wanted to know why I let the devil in the church. And I'm looking around, and all I see is them. And I'm thinking, I know I probably shouldn't have said this, but Brother Hay did. I said, are one of you guys a devil? Because I didn't know what they were talking about. And actually I did. But how many know sometimes you just got to be a little kind of like that? That's just Brother Hay. But I remember they immediately let me know that it had to do with the slides and those things, and they didn't want to come to church. And I've always handed out papers. See, this is pretty easy. It took a couple hours to do it, but in the old days, Brother Hay would have to type them up on a typewriter. Anybody know, unless you're a really good typist, how long it takes to type? Especially if you don't type like Brother Hay. I type with 2 fingers. That's all I know. Now, our youngest son, Ryan, he types about 30 words a minute or something. A lot. But here's the deal. Oh, yeah, some people can do that. Yep. And so what happens is, slowly but surely, things begin to take over. And things get pushed out, and something else replaces it. Now, we're going to get started tonight because this is one of those things that I want you to be kind of keeping in the back of your mind. And here's what it says. In Luke 2:7, it says, and she brought forth her firstborn son, wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. And every time I think about this scripture, and as we go through this tonight a little bit, we'll see that it coincides with other scriptures that kind of predict that was going to happen. But then I begin to think about, let's just talk about church for a minute. We used to have church on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, right? And sometimes a little extra during the week. And people came to all the services. Slowly over a period of time, things began to change, and COVID pretty much killed Sunday night for us. That's sort of kind of ended it in our church. But way before that happened with us, a whole bunch of churches had already stopped doing Sunday night because people had too much stuff to do to come to church. Now, back in the old days, and this is what I used to have to remind some of my preaching bosses, how many know back in the old days, people didn't work on Sunday? On Sunday, you didn't have a Walmart store to go to. And usually, depending on where you lived, you might have one little grocery store open, but that's because they were closed on Saturday, and they were Jewish, so they celebrated Sunday on Saturday, so they let them be open on Sunday. But for the most part, there was nothing open on Sunday. So guess what? People had more room in their life for him, for Jesus, and for the church, and for worship, and all those kind of things. And I don't know how many of you stay up with Charlie Kirk, but he just had published his last book. He had written it, and it hadn't been published yet. But Brother Hay hasn't got a copy to read it yet. I'm going to try to. But one of the things that the book is talking about, it's getting back to a place where we honor one day a week for the Lord. And all of a sudden, people get angry when Brother Hay says this, and they go, well, we're not under the law no more. I absolutely understand that. If you have to work on Sunday, Brother Hay understands that, but you better find one day a week to get some rest. Because I'm going to promise you, you try to go 7 days a week, no matter how strong you are, no matter any of those things, even how young you are, you will burn out over a period of time. I mean, I've been in those places where I was required to work a lot of hours, a lot of days without any breaks. I'm sure Brother Randy was being at sea on some of them ships. I'm sure Larry ran into some of that stuff in the Army when he was in there, and they didn't care if you were tired or not. Yeah, I could see that happening. But here's the problem. Sooner or later, your body starts breaking down. Your mind starts breaking down. God didn't create us that way. God created us, and this is what's so interesting to Brother Hay. And I'm not a Seventh-day Adventist, just so you know. And I'm not into any of those things. But there's a reason why God said that on the seventh day he rested, right? And that's for us. Because during that time, we should be making room in our life for Christ, making room for God, making room for studying the Bible and praying and reading and spending time with our family and not worrying about it. How many know you can worry all you want to, you don't change much, right? It's sort of like waiting for results from a doctor. You can worry about it all you want to, but you're not going to change the outcome of what's coming, right? Whether it's good or bad doesn't make any difference. But what's really interesting is when it turns out to be good, man, think about how much time you wasted worrying, right? And if it was bad, think about how much time you wasted worrying when you could have been praying for God to intervene. Kind of makes one of those things make a little more sense. So when I'm looking at this thing and I'm looking at not having room for Christ on that very first night, things haven't changed much. Just the method of pushing God out has changed. The way things get done has changed. And there's a lot of good things. You know, sometimes Sister Hay and I will FaceTime with our grandkids in Arizona. How many think that's a cool thing? We don't do it as much as we used to because I hate to tell you this, we're kind of boring to them now. I know that sounds bad, but once they get to be, 10, 11 years old, grandparents are, okay, you guys are kind of boring, It's not like when they were little. But I always loved the ability to be able to do that. How many think that's so cool? I don't care how much money you had, you couldn't have done that at one time. When Brother Hay was in Korea, and even the last time, I couldn't FaceTime Sister Hay. Matter of fact, we weren't allowed to take cell phones with us. And I remember when Eileen, and I know they're not here, they had to go to Clovis tonight, but Eileen and Leo, when he was over in the Middle East, guess what? He had a cell phone. He could FaceTime her pretty much any time he wanted to. I know. Is that crazy or what? Yeah. Well, believe it or not, our one grandson did his even in boot camp. And I was like, they let you have a phone? and you could do that. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I know for us, the first phone call I got was I'd already been there for over a month. And they give me a 2-minute phone call. Yep. Yeah, we had a guy stand there with the stopwatch. Boop, 2 minutes, boom. And they say, just a minute. He just, boop, clicked the thing down and shut it off. So we never had that issue where Brother Hay was at. They monitored that. But I think about how much things have changed. So some of those things are good, right? But can I tell you, when they first came out, everybody did it. But like I said, now that's kind of going away because it became commonplace. And now people have the excuse. Back in the day, they would say, well, I would come see you, but I couldn't come see you, so I FaceTiming you. So now they don't come see you, or they don't FaceTime you. How easy is that to get that way, right? So just keep in mind that that's what ends up happening. And it's not changed at all since when Jesus was born and placed in that manger. Now, the very first scripture, it's Isaiah chapter 53:3, Kaylee, if you got it back there. It says, the world has always rejected them. And here's what it says in Isaiah 53:3. It's number 1 on your paper. It says, he was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, and as one from whom men hide their faces. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Now, can you imagine if when Jesus was born, if people really knew who was in that manger? Have you ever thought about that? How many think it would have been a lot different? We know heaven recognized it. We know about the choir of the angels, right? We know the shepherds that showed up. Now, you got to be careful here to make sure you're historically correct. The wise men didn't show up for 2 years. I know in our Christmas plays they come the same night, but that's not really how it worked. That's how come when the king set that decree, he told them to kill all the male children that were aged 2 and under. Okay? But keep this in mind. Here is the Son of God being born. And the world was so busy, even back then, no TV, no cell phones, no computers, no iPads, none of that stuff. And they still are so busy, Brother Randy, they didn't even know he came. And sometimes what we need to think about here is, when it says in Isaiah 53 that people, men literally, and when it says men here, it's not talking just men, it's talking about humanity. Okay, we need to make sure we make that understood in the time we live in. But it says they hid their faces from him. And every time I think about this little stable scene going on, I think about how many times God comes to talk and minister to us, and we do not esteem who he is. And sometimes we hide our face from him, right? Sometimes we allow everything around us to push him so far in that background, right? That we don't even want him coming to the forefront. And when I think about this, it's important that Jesus came the way he needed to come. He was born the way he needed to be born. And if you just allow your mind to go back there for a minute, but if Jesus was born in a palace, think about, even back then, do you think the people, when there was a male child born in a palace about the same time as Jesus, do you think that child got a little bit of attention? I think everybody would have been given attention because it's the king's son, right? And everybody would have been like, oh, and I hate to tell you this, but sometimes some babies are ugly, just so you know. I hate to say that. They don't look so good. But after a couple weeks, they're all beautiful. Okay? But when they're first born, sometimes it's like, whoa, I don't know about that one. I'm just teasing. But seriously, sometimes when they're born, because it's such a hard labor, they're a little bit deformed and that kind of thing. And then isn't it cool how God created us, that within just a short period of time, they become the most beautiful thing you can imagine. Okay? But if he would have came in that palace, he would have got all that recognition. But let me ask you a question. If Jesus was born in a palace, how many of you would have trouble worshiping him? How many struggle with this already? Think about this with Brother Hay. How many people feel they're unworthy to worship God? Now, if he would have came in a palace, how much more unworthy would we feel? Right? You say, well, bro, hey, I'm as good as anybody. That's what a lot of people say until they're all by themselves and they're struggling. And all of a sudden the doubts come in and they begin to think about, well, I should have done this. I should have done that. Oh, man, I didn't obtain this. I didn't obtain that. And all of a sudden all those self-doubts begin to creep in. And how hard is it to function in those times? If you ever watch certain, some people don't like football, so it's okay. And some people go, bro, hey, don't even use that because I don't even understand a thing about it. But it don't matter whether you're talking football, baseball, whatever sport you're talking about. It don't matter if you're talking about a workplace, the president of our country, right? The governor of our state, the pastor. We all need to understand that leadership sometimes is a difficult thing. And the last thing you want as a leader is somebody going, I don't know what to do. Yeah, we do. We have a lot of them that aren't sure what to do. And I used to tell all the guys that I worked with when I was in the military, I go, the only bad decision is no decision. And people would get so angry at me. And they would say, that don't make any sense. I go, no, because do you know what God's word says about somebody that is kind of always wishy-washy about things? It says if you're lukewarm, what's he going to do? He'll spew you out of his mouth. He wants you to be hot or be cold. At least you're got a decision that's been made. Does that make sense? You could be in a lot of trouble. And I remember I was first learning how to drive. And Larry probably remembers our grandpa. I don't know if he ever took him driving. I know I'm the one he taught. I know for sure he taught me how. I don't know if he taught Larry, but when he was teaching me how to drive, I was only like 14 years old. And my grandpa only knew two things. You threw the accelerator as far down to the floor as it could go, and you went as fast as a car would go, and you made no hesitation. That's just the way he was. And I know more than one time he said, you know what, boy? And I'd be like, what? I mean, he goes, you got to quit hesitating. If you're going to go, just go. Don't be trying to make up your mind. But you know what he's really saying? Because hesitation can cause you to have an accident, right? It's sort of like you come up to that yellow light, am I going to go or not go? And if you hesitate too long and go, then it's red, and guess what? You're going to get hit. If you're going to go through, you better go through immediately. But I can remember driving back then. We didn't have interstates like we have now. Had all these little curvy roads, and one of them, I still remember the name of the road. Is that bad? I remember. It was Highway 2. And that thing was so curvy. And I'd be like, anybody here remember when you first started driving? Now, I like to drive fast. He's probably the reason why, but we'll leave that alone. But I remember trying to come up to them curves and going, hey, man, I got to slow down. I don't know if I can make this curve. About the second time I was driving him, his foot came, because back then they didn't have all that stuff in the middle. His foot came over, and his foot went on my foot, and I'm going around them curves. It says 30 miles an hour, and I'm doing 65 or 70 around them. It's pretty scary. And one of the things he told me was, boy, I keep telling you, quit hesitating. But anyway, that's what got me in trouble when I got older. I'm still working on not driving as fast. I've learned my lesson. I only drive 5 miles over most of the time. I give the caveat most of the time. I try to do that. Yeah, they got cruise control. I take my foot off the gas. But I look at those things, and I think about being that young person and not sure what I needed to do, right? And what I'm saying to you, sometimes spiritually speaking, you don't know which way to go. Sometimes make a decision, because here's what the cool part is. If you mess up, that's why we have an advocate, and his name is Jesus. He's not throwing us away. Now, I hate to tell you this, but I remember one time running into the ditch with this car. At least I didn't do like Larry. Larry opened the door and went out the back door once. I won't forget that one either. I had to convince my grandpa to stop the car to go get him. He said, serves him right. I told him not to. Things were a lot different back when we were young, okay? I saw a lady today that was on one of the shows Sister A and I watch, and the question was something about, one of the questions was talking about a kid throwing a tantrum in a store, and that was like one of the answers, embarrassing the parents, whatever. The grandma said, they only did that one time with me. She said, we had a different remedy for that than they have nowadays. And I thought, man, Sister Hayes got a twin. But anyway, I know. But I'm laughing. But if you can get this in your mind, that sometimes, you can't live your life being afraid. Does that make sense? And what the enemy does, he tries to make you feel like you're by yourself. And when he makes you feel like you're by yourself, how much more difficult does a decision become? Because sometimes making a decision is very difficult when you're the only one there. And you don't recognize that the Lord will help you and that he can guide you and he can get you through those things. It's sort of like waking up in the morning. We talked about this on Sunday School Sunday. I told them, listen, growing old is not for the weak. And Brother Singletary looked at me. I looked at him. I said, hey, I'm just telling you, it takes a lot of courage sometimes to get up in the morning. And it takes a lot of courage to put one foot in front of the other. It takes a lot of courage not to be complaining about everything that's going on and recognizing, it's a new normal for you. But I look at that, and all of a sudden I begin to think, but the fact that Jesus wasn't born in that castle lets us know that he understands what it's like to be rejected even at his birth. Because really, if they would have recognized who he was, he should have been born in the palace. Right? Think about it. Yep. And when we look at that, though, if the world would have recognized who he was, in other words, what Brother Hay is saying is the palace is what he left. And he gave that up for us. Does that make sense? Now, he could have come the other way, but ordinary folks, we would not have a connection with them. How many think it's real rich when somebody that has all the money they need and they're not struggling from week to week or day to day, for that person to look somebody in the eye and just tell them, well, just get over it. Right? Don't work that way, does it? If you're struggling, you're struggling. But sometimes what happens is people forget where they came from. They forget the struggles. It's like I think about when we see little ones, and Eileen brings her little girl over. She's going to be the 14th, I think. Yeah, so Sunday. I got to get her a birthday present. But anyway, I remember when our kids were 2 years old. How many know I can really relate to what she's going through and glad that they're not mine? And so when she's at our house, I never fail to do what a papa does. Hey, you want this cookie? Matter of fact, you know what? You can have two. And then one of my favorite things, she loves these little fruit cocktail cups that you get. We always have some in our house. They only come over once a month when the worker comes out. But I always have them there because, man, she loves those things. And her mom's like, she don't need that. I go, oh, man, she's starving. She needs that little cup, right? Because I remember a time when Sister Hay and I couldn't do that. That makes sense? And so now I'm in a different place, so I can afford to do that for that child and maybe spoil them just a little bit, okay? And I think that's pretty cool. But we got to keep in mind. Now, number 2 is where we're at, and here's where we want to get through tonight, and I'll hurry, and then we'll finish the rest next week. It says, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation and took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men. And being found in the fashion as a man, listen to this little phrase, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. And that's in Philippians 2, 5 through 8. And the first one I want to talk to you about under A, it says, Jesus left heaven for you and I, came as he did, so we all can relate to him and him back to us. Now, how cool is that? All of a sudden, Brother Hay thinks about some of these things sometimes. It is so difficult for us when we think about God that we see God way up here and we can't even see the bottom of his shoe. That's not how this was. Jesus humbled himself and left that to come to be like you and I. That's why he wasn't born in the palace. And here's the hard part. He had to humble himself. How many times do we have to humble ourselves to do what we know is right? What Brother Hay says, I know it gets me in trouble in my house, but what if I say to you, a soft answer turns away wrath? Right? Isn't that? But in order to give the soft answer, what do you got to do? You got to humble yourself to give the soft answer because yourself wants to give what? The right answer, Sister A said. I tell Tanya this all the time. I go, Tanya, put a smile on your face. Well, I know some people can't hear. I get blamed for everything. That's just how this works. It's okay. After all the years we've been together, I was trying to figure out how many years it's been, but it won't be 53 until February. I don't care what we met. I'm talking about that we've been married. Okay, well, we didn't even go together back then. And anyway, what I want to get across to you is how hard is it to humble yourself to become a servant to what God's word says? How hard is it to return kindness, right, for somebody that's done you wrong? All of a sudden, in my little feeble mind, this is one of those things I work on all the time, worked on my whole life. I still struggle with it. You can ask Sister Hay. Well, my brother was over there the other day. They got me animated because I remember this guy I was dealing with in Clovis here. It's only been a couple of years ago, about 3 or 4 years. And the guy was really being ugly to Brother Hay and talking all the smack. Have you ever had somebody that tells you all this stuff and they're way over there? And I told him, I said, listen, I said, you know what? I will be there and then we'll finish this discussion. And, of course, I behaved myself only because he wouldn't come out. I went to his office, and I told his secretary, I said, this is who I'm here to see. And I heard of she in the background, and she went back. So I knew he was there, right? She comes back out. She said, I don't know what happened. He must have left. and I said it loud enough where he could hear Brother Hay. I said, well, when he gets back, you tell him he needs to find somebody else to talk that way to on the phone, or at least have enough courage to come and face the person that he's talking to. Man, do you know how many hours I stayed awake that night praying? A lot. I don't know if he stayed awake or not, but probably he probably said, as long as I got that secretary out there, I'm safe. But I think about that. I had to go and I literally had to pray, Lord, don't let me get to that place. You know what made me so angry? My pride. The fact that I would have to humble myself to be nice to somebody that's telling me all this stuff, but then don't have the courage to come out and look me in the eye. And I'm not going to lie to you. 27 years in the military, Sister Hay and I talked about it this morning. Every once in a while, I can take so much, but then there's a point, and I have to get a reset. But the reset, believe it or not, is not from somebody else. It's a reset in my walk with the Lord to get back to the place to be willing to humble myself to do what I know is the right thing to do. And you know what is weird? I can be with somebody that's been mean to me and done ugly stuff to Brother Hay a million times and forgive them and work and put my arms around them and love them just like nothing. But when that personal thing gets involved, does that make sense? Yep. And what ends up happening is, at the end of the day, it wouldn't have mattered what would have went on. Brother Hay still would have had an answer to the Lord. Does that make sense? And so I had to make a choice. Do I humble myself and do what I know is right, or do I do what I want to do? And trust me, if you think that battle ever goes away, as we're getting ready to close tonight, I want you to keep this in mind. It's a battle that we fight for our entire life. And Paul said, and this is what I want to give you to take with you until next week. Paul said that we have to crucify this old flesh, not once a week, not one time in our life, every day. And sometimes we have to be like what Jesus said in forgiving people that wrong us. Sometimes I think we got to do it 7 times 70 in one day. We got to reset that and get that restarted and get back to that place where we're willing to humble ourselves and recognize. But I promise you that the enemy's job is always going to be to make your life not have room for Christ in it. He'll keep you doing so much stuff. If you would, you can stand with Brother Hay. If you have offering, you can just put it up here. Kaylee's my offering getter. You could turn that off, baby. And yeah, Tanya was my passer outer tonight, and Kaylee was my offering getter person. But I want to pray with you before we go and listen. Don't ever think that God isn't listening. If God can humble himself enough to leave heaven and be born in a stable, in my mind, it is just so hard for me to picture that. Yeah, the next one gets really good. That's why I wanted to stop and save it for next week. Hopefully we'll get it all done next week. But keep this in your thought process. He loved you enough. Have you ever really been in love with somebody, and how much will you be willing to give up for them? In the military, I promise you, when Brother Hay was overseas, I would have given my life for whoever was living in our country. I was willing to do that. But I promise you that I'm a lot more willing to give my life for Sister Hay. Because I already died. I would have been in trouble. But why do we do that? Because we love them, right? There's not a one of my children that live with us or don't live with us, that are here or not here, that I wouldn't be willing to put my life down. And one of the things that Sister A and I, we talk about this. I don't know how anybody turns their back when someone's being hurt and you have the ability to help. You have to make the effort. Now, here's the question as we pray. Look around you. There are a lot of people that are in just as much a danger, but just not a physical death, but a spiritual death and losing out for all eternity with God all around us. That's why we got to be willing to humble ourselves to reach out to him. Does that make sense? Let's pray. Father, thank you for the opportunity to be in your house. Lord, first and foremost, I thank you for each one that's here. Lord, if there's one within the sound of my voice, Father, that's in a valley tonight, Father, I pray that your Holy Spirit would just reach down and engulf them. Wrap your arms around them, let them feel your presence, and remind them no matter what they're walking through, you'll never leave them nor forsake them. But, Lord, that you'll always pursue them. And, Lord, I pray, go with each one.